Thank you for joining us with the news on QTV. My name is Diana Sumbwe. We take a look at stories making headlines. Higher Education Minister Nkanduro has angered members of parliament with her response on what led to the riot at the University of Zambia last Thursday. The Center for Trade Policy and Development, CTPD, has projected an increase in government debt accumulation as a result of increased borrowing. And the Jesuit Center for Theological Reflection, JCTR, says the decision by government to replace value-added tax with sales tax will enable the country to benefit more from the mining sector. And now the news in detail. Higher Education Minister Professor Nkanduro angered members of parliament with her response to a question on what caused the riot at the University of Zambia last Thursday, leading to the death of a student. Responding to a question by Mufulira Member of Parliament Dr. Evans Chibanda, who wanted to know what caused the riots at the University of Zambia, what immediate measures the government is taking to restore an academic environment at the institution, and what measures the government is taking to pay salaries for University of Zambia staff and students' allowances on time, Professor Luo said the cause of the riot was as a result of delayed meal allowances. She has told Parliament that it is for this reason that government has instructed management at the University of Zambia and the Zambia Police to thoroughly investigate the motive behind the protest by the students. Professor Luo says that government did not in any way delay in paying students their meal allowances as they were due on 6 October 2018. She says the behavior by students to riot was instigated by an outsider and that government would do anything possible to bring to book those involved in the Unza riot.
Zambia security and other security ways to institute investigations into what the true motive for the riot might have been, given that the students' allowances were not the cause, as they were not delayed, and were actually paid 1 day before the date. This is especially so, given that this information was communicated to the students. The answer to be, Madam Speaker, the government has stated above, paid all outstanding meal allowances to students for the term, and intends to commence the process of paying other allowances such as project and book allowances as soon as the necessary documentation is made available by the university. In addition, Madam Speaker, to the above immediate measures, a number of medium-term to long-term measures are underway to improve security at the university. In this regard, management has been directed to immediately institute investigations to establish the true motive of the riots and bring every person to book. Management has also been directed to undertake a comprehensive review of the security position and related requirements at the institution and present a report to my ministry within 1 week. In consideration of the fact that there is information alluding to the fact that most riots relating to students are being initiated by outside elements, the ministry, working with the Treasury, will implement the recommendations of the security report by implementing the following security interventions: reducing the porous nature of the University of Zambia by reinforcing the perimeters fenced around the university and reinforcing the security. It's introducing electronic access control and closed-circuit television CCTV cameras, and 3, expedite the process to reduce squatting in the university as not authorized bona fide students, and this further leads to compromise insecurity. The answer to C, Madam Speaker, Zambia.
But her response was not received well by both the ruling and opposition members of parliament, who felt the minister was misleading the House as well as using emotions when answering questions from members of parliament.
I want to find out from you, do the police have the right to go and throw tear gas into the hostels when the riot, as we are saying, was taking place at the roadside? Yeah. Do they have the right to do that, Honorable Minister? Thank you, Madam Speaker.
The Honorable Minister of Higher Education.
Thank you, Madam Madam Speaker, in answering this question, I'd like to ask the Honourable Member of Parliament a different question. Do the students have the rights? Do the students have the rights to go and smash innocent people's cars?
Minister, I will not be emotional. I will sympathize with you, you are sick. But last time a similar incident happened at the University of Zambia. Most of the members here asked that we investigate and go to the bottom of who shot that last student was killed. And we wanted you to go down to the police commander why they should command their officers to go in the rooms, tear gas the students, and shoot them. This was not done. Don't you think that by not taking action against the police, whose responsibility was to move these students from the roadside, follow them in the hospitals, kill them in cold blood, is causing police officers to continue killing children at the University of Zambia, because your government is supporting the police and not taking action through the way you have answered this question. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
The Center for Trade Policy and Development, CTPD, has projected an increase in government debt accumulation in 2019 as a result of increased borrowing. Making a presentation during the NGO Wash Forum panel discussion on the 2019 national budget, CTPD Research Officer Bright Chizondi said government should reduce the stock of public debt in order to mitigate the risk of debt distress. He adds that government should also improve budget implementation and reporting on debt issues in order to ease public distress. Mr. Chizonde says it is expected that interest rates are going to fall in 2019 because of the reduction in domestic borrowing by government. He has further called on the government to implement other measures aimed at reducing debt payment, such as refinancing and debt restructuring, in order to increase spending on social services.
CTPD makes the following policy recommendations, so these are not budget recommendations. First, we want to say that the government should reduce the stock of public debt in order to mitigate the risk of debt distress. We are actually seeing distress coming, debt distress. Technically, debt distress comes on when the country fails to meet its obligation. So we are not yet there, but we are seeing already a reallocation of resources from social services towards debt payments. Government should implement other measures aimed at reducing the debt payments, such as refinancing and debt restructuring, in order to increase spending on social services. Then government should improve fiscal financial management in order to increase the share of grants financing in the budget. We have seen that also in 2018 and 2019, the share of grants has reduced in our revenues because of the recent financial mismanagement issues that came up. So we want an increase in financial management so as to attract more grants and instead of increasing external borrowing. The government should improve budget implementation and reporting on debt issues in order to ease public distress. Recently, there has been a lot of public distress with respect to Chinese debt, and the government has been silent in explaining the terms and conditions of the contraction of Chinese debt. We need more reporting so as to ease public distress.
Speaking at the same event, Water Aid Head of Public Policy Isabel Mukelebai says water is a social good which should be accessible by all because it is a fundamental right. Ms. Mukelebai says there is still need to improve coverage for water and sanitation in the country.
Because water, for it to be made available as a social good, means that it has to be produced somewhere. It means there's hardware. It means there are certain other things that have to be bought in order to provide it. And we understand that sales tax is a tax applicable at a point of sale, at various points of sale. So it means that certain things that you need in order to provide the water will be subject to tax. And for that reason, we do see the possibility that there will be an impact, even in the context of us wanting to feel that the tax will not affect critical service delivery points such as water. So I think we argue that water is a social good and it must be accessible by all because it is a fundamental right, and therefore anything in terms of the tax regime that even seems to threaten that fulfillment or that right becomes a problem for us. Because in Zambia, when you look at our access levels, we are still at a point where we need to improve coverage for water, particularly in the rural areas. We still need to improve coverage for sanitation, because...
And NGO Wash Forum consultant Andrich Tembo says following up issues during the joint water sector review helps make progress. Jesuit Center for Theological Reflections, JCTR, has welcomed the decision by government to introduce sales tax to replace value-added tax. Finance Minister Margaret Mwanakatwe announced during the 2019 budget presentation that government will abolish value-added tax VAT and replace it with a non-refundable sales tax in April 2019, a move likely to help the government boost revenue collection and bring down mounting debt. JCTR Social and Economic Program Officer Innocent Ndashe is confident that the introduced sales tax will enhance the country's benefication from the mining sector. In an interview with QTV News, Mr. Ndashe says for a long time the country has been losing tax revenue from the mining sector, which otherwise could have been channeled towards infrastructure development in the health and education sectors, among others. Mr. Ndashe adds that the decision by government to abolish VAT will in the long run help address financial linkages and further enhance tax administration.
Welcomes a measure that has been proposed or reintroduced, considering that I think we've been paying so much in terms of value-added tax refunds to for example, mining companies, those that have been making those claims. And in the process, as a country, we've been losing. And there are variable resources that could go, for example, to essential services like construction of schools, drugs in hospitals. So I think the new measure will help us to reduce the financial leakages, but also to ensure that possibly it will strengthen or improve in the administration of taxes. So I think for the JCTR, that is a welcome move.
Meanwhile, economist Oliver Sasa has reiterated that the recent increase in the fuel price will impact negatively on the 2019 budget. Professor Sasa says this is considering that fuel is the engine of the economy. He says with a hike in the price of fuel, people should expect spillover effects on the prices of basic needs and services on the market.
The only way you fail or you can avoid increasing the price when there's volatility in the exchange rate is to have a subsidy from the government. It presupposes that the government has the required resources in the treasury to meet that subsidy. Unfortunately, as a situation now, the finances are, as a country, we are quite stressed there, and we cannot see how government can step in. Yes, of course, to some extent, when you have a bit more resources, you can stabilize. Government does stabilize prices in order to ensure that the effect of a fuel increase does not have a ripple effect across the board to a level where the consumers of goods and services get affected. Because an increase in fuel price automatically leads to an increase almost across the board in all services and commodities, and that is really where the challenge is. So in terms of the effect, which you should expect is that not necessarily in the same proportions, but you should expect a significant increase, not only in transportation. One thing that we have to appreciate is that oil is an important energy source that provides or that drives the wheels of industry. It's an important input in production. Because of that, you find that almost everything will go up, which of course may disturb some of the projections that we've seen for the 2019 budget. So one has to expect those things to happen.
Government has disclosed that farmers will start accessing their 2018-2019 farming inputs before the end of November. Agriculture Minister Michael Katambo says says the inputs are already in warehouses in different parts of the country awaiting distribution. He says the groundwork to enable farmers access the inputs has been completed. And Mr. Katambo has told Parliament in a ministerial statement that government has spent a total of 21 million kwacha on nutrition programs from 2014 to date. The Ministry of Agriculture is implementing the Scaling Up Nutrition and the first 1,000 Most Critical Days program, MCDP, of which the first phase was implemented from 2014 to 2017. Mr. Katambo says the preparations for the implementation of Phase 2 of the 1,000 Most Critical Days program are ongoing and will be implemented before early next year. And Mr. Katambo has reiterated government's commitment to improving the food security and nutritional status of citizens of Zambia.
The role of the ministry is to provide nutrition-sensitive agricultural interventions and ultimately improve the diets of target groups. The program was implemented in 7 provinces, namely Eastern, Muchinga, Northern, Western, Northwestern, Central, and Wapula provinces. One of the key outputs of the program was the introduction of biofortified crops which are nutrient-dense, such as orange-fleshed maize or orange-fleshed sweet potatoes and iron-rich beans in participating households and communities. Currently, preparations for the implementation of Phase 2 of the 1,000 Most Critical Days program are ongoing, and implementation is expected to start before early next year. The program is supposed to by a consortium of donors. A total of 21 million kwacha has been spent on the program from 2014 to date. Madam Speaker, the Scaling Up Nutrition Program is a manifestation of our intersectoral coordinating among government ministries and cooperating partners. Further, the ministry has also been supporting the school feeding programs under the Ministry of General Education with maize from the food reserve agency. Madam Speaker, the Ministry of Agriculture in collaboration with the Central Statistical Office, Food and Agriculture Organization of the United Nations and National Food and Nutrition Commission has prepared an updated national food balance sheet to take into account not only grains but other food crops, livestock products and fish. This is a demonstration of our commitment to ensuring food security and good nutrition for the majority of our Zambian population.
The Zambia Police Command should take responsibility for the crime committed when police officers fired tear gas in students' hostels during a riot at the University of Zambia last week, leading to the loss of life, Alliance for Democracy and Development President Charles Milupi has said. Mr. Milupi says it is against the Geneva International Protocol on Chemical Weapons to release tear gas in a confined room. He says under this protocol, which Zambia has ratified and domesticated into law, discharging tear gas in a confined room is part of the definition of a chemical weapon. In an interview with QTV News, Mr. Milupi says if any police officer therefore discharges tear gas in a confined room, as the case was at the University of Zambia, they must be prosecuted under the international law. He says Inspector General of Police Kakoma Kanganja and Home Affairs Minister Stephen Kampyongo must in this case be answerable to the crime police officers have committed. Mr. Milupi says given the gravity of the crime leading to the loss of life, Mr. Kanganja and Mr. Kampyongo should have resigned by now.
In as far as the breaking of this international law is concerned, I think Zambians must ask that the command, the top command in the police, from Inspector General, from the Minister of Home Affairs, who are in charge of these things, they should take responsibility for this, a failure to which they should actually be arraigned before international court for discharging chemical weapons as defined in the protocol that I've referred to. I know this protocol because in 2011, I was one of the MPs under the chairmanship of the then Member of Parliament for Pambashe, Dr. Bernard Chisha, who ratified this in committee stage. So I know the definition of chemical weapons according to this protocol. Tear gas in a confined room. So those that still go ahead and discharge in this matter, they must be held to account. And in the way the police discharge their duties, you cannot escape the Inspector General to take this responsibility, the Minister of Home Affairs to take these responsibilities. In other countries where life is lost like that, we would have expected these top officials to resign on their own accord. But if they don't, then the law should take its course. And I'm talking about international law in this particular case.
Energy Minister Matthew Nkuwa struggled to answer questions from members of parliament on the Saudi Arabia oil deal worth 20 million United States dollars. This forced Deputy First Speaker of the National Assembly, Catherine Namugala, to direct the minister to come back to the House on Friday and issue a comprehensive statement on the Saudi Arabia oil deal. Responding to an initial question by Chinsali Member of Parliament, Kalalwe Mukosa, who wanted to know what factors led to the increase of fuel prices on 2nd October 2018 and what measures the government is taking to prevent further increase in fuel prices, Mr. Nkuwa said government is looking for means to reduce the fuel prices. He says government is looking for a strategic partner to improve productivity at Indeni Petroleum Oil Refinery in Indola, whose production capacity currently stands at 650,000 metric tons per annum. He further says the strategic partner will help finance the improving of infrastructure and production at Indeni Oil Refinery. Mr. Mkosha, who also wanted to know whether the government is aware that the Energy Regulation Board issued a statement on 27 September 2018 through the Director for Consumer and Public Affairs, which dispelled rumors about the looming fuel price increase, and if so, what disciplinary measures the government has taken against the officer for misleading the nation.
Zambia had entered into a deal with Saudi Arabia for the supply of cheaper oil, which would lead fuel prices to plummet up to about 5 kwacha. That such supply would be for 5 years. To date, we have not seen that Saudi cheap oil for 5 years supply.
So now the question we want to hear from you, sir, because it's this same floor of the house that was told about that deal. And I hear this same house would like to know. The Saudi oil deal worth $20 million. Did it flow to Zambia? Is the deal still valid? Did it flow to Zambia? And if it didn't flow, is the 5 years still binding? Because DRB keeps increasing fuel, but first they remove the subsidy and say, now we are not going to increase anymore. Because there is a Saudi oil deal coming. So the people understood and said, yes, let the fuel be increased because the government will not interfere. And then again there was another increase, and then now there is another increase. So when do we expect the next increase? And when do we expect the Saudi oil to start coming so that we can buy for 5 kwacha, for 5 kwacha, at least even for 6 days, I was put by $100 here. I thank you.
Honorable Minister of Energy, if you are not
The Center for Young Leaders in Africa, CYLA, has implored the Zambia Police Service to come up with better and safer methods of crowd control, especially during riots. CYLA Executive Director Jones Mulunga says the recent fracas at the University of Zambia, which left one student dead and another with a broken spine, is unfortunate. Mr. Mulunga has demanded for a permanent end to police taking crowd control to the students' rooms during riots. He says following students to their rooms or throwing tear gas canisters in the students' rooms is a sheer act of bullying and cruelty to students who stay in their rooms during riots as they have nowhere to go. Mr. Mulunga has also called on students to consider using peaceful and amicable channels of airing their grievances in order to avoid the loss of lives. He has further expressed sadness that the country is still facing avoidable problems in public universities over 53 years after independence.
As young people, we have to come up with better ways of airing out our grievances. You know, even when we're demonstrating, we need to do it in an orderly manner. More so that every time when these demonstrations happen, we know that the police are going to come with disproportionate force to try to stop it, which ultimately leads into deaths, as can be witnessed what happened last week. So I think as students in higher learning institutions, as young people everywhere, we need to change the tactics. We need to sober up and stop this issue of every time we are not happy with something, we are not happy with the leader, we are not happy with what the government is doing, we have to go on the street, demonstrate, become rioters, damage private property. This is not acceptable. And I think as young people, we just need to self-correct ourselves. But then to the authorities, Minister of Home Affairs, the police and the Minister of Home Affairs, I think it is high time we probably brought into the curriculum of the police better ways of managing people that are rioting or crowd control management. Because it can't be that after 54 years of independence, we are still using brutal means of suppressing people's way of airing their views out. It cannot be, and I think it shouldn't be allowed. And I think as young people, we are not going to accept this, and we are probably going to engage the minister, engage the Inspector General of Police to see how we can manage these riots that our fellow young people get involved in.
The Drug Enforcement Commission in Mchinga Province has formally arrested and jointly charged 13 people in Lavushibanda district of Mchinga Province for trafficking in loose cannabis, cannabis seeds and unlawful cultivation of fresh cannabis plants, weighing a total of over 105 tons, contrary to the laws of Zambia. Commission Acting Public Relations Officer Kamfumisha Manchinshi has named the suspects as Bershat Banda, 65, Zedi Mumba, 44, Rudongosa, 25, and Desho Mwape of Mumpamanza Village, Chintumlenga, 17, Maxwell Kachule, 18, Ngosamanda, 16, Chulakunda, 17, and Maxwell Manda, 17, all of Isaac Village in Lavushmanda district of Mchinga Province. Others include Febi Banda, 54, Madson Manda, 31, Maxon Chilando, 43, and Stanley Kazembe, 50, popularly known as Satana of Kamwendo Village, also of Lavushmanda district. Mr. Manchishi says the suspects were nabbed in 4 major operations conducted by the Commission in the area, leading to the discovery of several fields of cannabis believed to be supplying various towns in Lusaka, Copperbelt and eastern provinces. He adds that of the 13 suspects, 9 have also been slapped with additional charges for trafficking in a total of 322.9 kilograms of dry loose cannabis in separate incidences. The Mental Health Users Network of Zambia has noted the need for increased programs that will reduce stigma against persons suffering from mental illnesses. Moza Board Chairperson Mulima Kasote tells Q News that there is still high levels of stigma against people with mental illnesses from society. And Mr. Kasote says the programs against abuse should be coupled with programs aimed at reducing drug abuse among the young people in society. We have more details in this report.
World Mental Health Day is observed on 10th October every year with the overall objective of raising awareness of mental health issues around the world and mobilizing efforts in support of mental health. Zambia will join the rest of the world in commemorating the 2018 World Mental Health Day under the theme Young People and Mental Health in a Changing World. The day provides an opportunity for all stakeholders working on mental health issues to talk about their work and what more needs to be done to make mental health a reality for young people worldwide. Serious numbers of young people are confined to this institution because they have suffered a mental health illness because of abuse of drugs and alcohol. I talked to the Mental Health Users Network of Zambia, and this is their message through the board chairperson, Mulima Kasote.
Young people and mental health in a changing world. We are focusing on young people because there are a lot of problems today that young people are facing. For example, the challenge of drug abuse has gone up, and there are a lot of young people in Chinama today who are suffering mental illnesses because of the abuse of drugs. If you might be aware, I'm one person who was a young person at one time, and I suffered mental illness. I had a depression when I was in grade 9. So we are not just talking from without, we are talking about things that are affecting people. Today it might be me suffering from a mental health challenge, tomorrow it's you. There's a lot of stigma that is attached to mental illnesses and mental health. For example, when you talk about mental illness and mental health, these are two different things. Mental illness has to do with the actual illness, and mental health is the actual well-being of a human being. So every one of us has got a mental health. So that's what we need to know, that mental health affects everyone, regardless of the illness.
Ministry of Health Principal Mental Health Officer Zaliwe Banda shares the ministry's interpretation of the World Mental Health Day and the extent of mental health among young people in Zambia.
We are concerned about the young people, where we need to do a lot of sensitization in the prevention of mental health problems, and also early identification of treatment and accessibility to mental health services. And on this one, on accessibility, we are talking about the ministry is actually putting in initiative to create the e-mental health platform, where the young people who are actually using the social media most of the times should be able to access these services and raise their concerns concerning mental health problems.
She has assured the ministry's commitment to ensuring the public gets information on mental health through various partnerships and programs.
I'm sure we are aware about the issues of alcohol that are also contributing to mental health problems in young people. This is the group that is actually very much in use of drugs and alcohol, and they are the people who have a lot of problems in mental problems. This is a problem which cannot be handled by Ministry of Health alone. And as a ministry, we are looking at engaging other sectors so that we promote a multi-sectoral approach. We have Ministry of Gender at play, we have the Ministry of Youth and Sports, we have Ministry of Education at play. Also, they have specific roles to play into this.
Ms. Banda also has this message to the communities.
With our understanding, mental health problems are chronic problems. And these are problems that we want the community themselves to play a major role in supporting people with mental problems. Of course, the providers can actually provide or prescribe treatment for these people, but the ones that play a big role are the community themselves, especially the family. So these should be able to support. If it means the patient has already been identified as a client, they should be able to support where adherence to treatment is concerned. They should also be able to protect this client, because these are the people that are actually vulnerable because of the stigmatization and the discrimination.
Parents, teachers, preachers, and politicians all have an important role to help build life skills of young people and adolescents to help them cope with everyday challenges at home, school, anywhere and everywhere, to prevent them from suffering from mental health illnesses. Nakaonga reporting for QTV News in Lusaka.
Minister of Housing and Infrastructure Development Permanent Secretary Charles Mushota has disclosed that the Romanian government has given Zambia a grant to conduct a feasibility study on upgrading slums in the country. Mr. Mushota says the feasibility study, which will be conducted by a Romanian NGO, Rio Aid, is expected to commence in the next few weeks. He has told Q News that the Ministry of Housing and Infrastructure Development will prioritize Kanyama and Mrs. compounds during the feasibility study. Mr. Mushota says once the feasibility study has been concluded, government will then look into how to finance the upgrading projects.
An NGO from Romania, and the Romanian government has given us a grant that we can go ahead with the feasibility study. So in the next few weeks, we will commence the feasibility study to see how far we can go in terms of upgrading the slums. We are going, of course, to start with Kanyama and probably also go to Mrs. After the feasibility study, then we'll look at how we can finance the actual now upgrading of these identified and planned settlements.
Zambia National Farmers Union ZNFU has observed that the Food Reserve Agency FRA may not meet its target of buying 500,000 metric tons of maize during the 2018 marketing season. ZNFU Media and Public Relations Manager Kelvin Kalei has told QTV News that ZNFU has been monitoring the buying of maize by the agency, which has revealed that the FRA is struggling to meet the target. Mr. Kalei claims that the FRA has so far only managed to buy less than 200,000 metric tons of maize since the maize marketing season commenced. He has attributed this to farmers opting to sell their maize to private buyers who are offering higher prices compared to the FRA. Mr. Kalei says while FRA is buying a 50 kg bag of maize at 70 kwacha, some foreign private buyers are offering 150 kwacha per bag. Meanwhile, Mr. Kalei says the union is concerned that up to now the FRA has not paid some farmers who have supplied maize. He says this is despite having assured farmers that they will be paid their dues within 14 days.
If you go to the Copper Belt, I think as at last month, they only bought the 1,000 metric tons of maize. You know, if you go to Lumez, the farmers were actually bypassing where FRA was selling. They were selling to private buyers because the private buyers were offering much more than FRA. The private buyers were offering 90. Those that were coming in from Malawi were offering 150 per 50 kg bag. So all of them were bypassing the FRA and selling to the private buyers. We looked in the FRA shed, it was almost empty. I could count the bags, one floor, one layer, you know. Everything was just being channeled out. So it means the marketing strategy for this season has been very poor. If it had not been for the past season where they had carryover stocks.
The Poultry Association of Zambia PAS has attributed the increase in the price of poultry feed to the drop in maize and soybeans production in the 2017-2018 farming season. Zambia recorded a drop in maize production from 3.6 million tons in the 2016-2017 farming season to 2.2 million tons in the 2017-2018 season. PAS Executive Manager Dominic Chanda tells QTV News that the fact that some business people are buying maize at 90 kwacha per 50 kg bag compared to the FRA price of 70 kwacha is also a sign that the country has a shortage of maize. Meanwhile, Mr. Chanda says the continued depreciation of the kwacha against other convertible currencies is also negatively affecting the poultry sector when it comes to the price of feed. He has since appealed to the government to come up with measures that will stabilize the exchange rate. The current market price for poultry feed ranges from 176 kwacha to 196 kwacha per 50 kilogram bag.
And fundamentally because of two issues, in fact three things now. We saw that during the 2017-2018 production season, maize output was reduced by almost 30% from 3.6 million metric tons to 2.2 million metric tons. We've also seen soybeans also reducing by almost 14% from 354 to about 304,000 metric tons. And as a result of that, government announced a floor price of about 70 kwacha, but the private sector has gone in to actually offer between 90 to 100 kwacha per 50 kg. That is a signal enough that there's no maize here, on the market. There was a statement that was issued by FRA, I think 2 weeks ago, that they only managed to get from the maize purchasing process about 132,000 metric tons out of the 500,000 metric tons. And that is an indication that the prices might also go up because there's no maize out there.
Minister of Gender Elizabeth Piri says government is working tirelessly to improve access to water and sanitation in the country. Speaking at the launch of the Lusaka Water and Storage Company's Social Inclusion and Gender Mainstreaming Policy and Peri-Urban Policy launch, Ms. Piri says if Zambia is to attain universal coverage for water sanitation by 2030, addressing social and gender issue is paramount. She says that the efforts of the Lusaka Water and Storage Company incorporating social gender in service delivery need to be commended and supported by all stakeholders. Ms. Piri notes that peri-urban areas are the most susceptible to waterborne diseases such as cholera, and it is only efforts such as those enshrined in the policies that can help to practically end the cycle of such diseases in Lusaka. The minister adds that she is pleased to hear that the two policies have been developed and revised with the support from the Millennium Challenge Account Corporation through the Millennium Challenge Account.
The revised peri-urban policy seeks to guide Lusaka Water and Sewerage Company in ensuring efficiency and effective service delivery to our people in the peri-urban areas of Lusaka province, and the peri-urban areas constitutes about 70% of the population of Lusaka province. The initiative of coming up with the peri-urban policy we are launching today shows how much Lusaka Water and Sewerage Company seeks to turn around at these areas where provision of water and sanitation is concerned. The peri-urban areas have most of the times been hit by waterborne diseases such as cholera, and this, I'm speaking to my constituency, for a long time it has been an epicenter. With the coming of these policies, I think Kanyama will be a great city.
Speaking at the same launch, Lusaka Water and Sewerage Company Acting Board Chairman Musonda Chimya says the two policies are very important because they will ensure that the company is sensitive to gender and social issues as it endeavors to improve access to water and sanitation. He adds that the launch of the two policies demonstrates the steady progress being made towards improving safe and affordable water and sanitation services for all people.
In an effort to ensure that we provide the service to the people in peri-urban areas who are more vulnerable, the company has continued to embark on a number of infrastructure projects with funding from internal and external sources. This has helped us to expand the water distribution network in some peri-urban areas and reduce the walking distance for the mothers and children who mostly draw water for household chores. Our desire is to see that every household has running tap water and good sanitation facilities. Honorable Minister and distinguished guests, you may be aware that we have just commissioned the construction of household toilets that will be constructed in George, Kanyama, and Chawama compounds. This is an example of how we are ensuring that all members of society are included and not left behind. They are being provided water and sanitation facilities that they can afford. This way, we are hoping that we can give our people a measure of dignity.
And Millennium Challenge Corporation Resident Country Director Stephen Mama says that gender plays an important role in water and sanitation.
Again, I commend Lusaka Water and the MD and the board for taking their leadership in implementing these two policies. To quote Kofi Annan, he was a former Secretary General to the UN, gender equality is more than a goal in itself. It is a precondition for meeting the challenge of reducing poverty, promoting sustainable development, and building good governance. This message is clear. Sustainable development relies on inclusive development. Efforts to promote economic growth and to help people lift themselves out of poverty are best achieved when they harness the full participation and potential of women, the poor, and other members of the community.
Matongo Basic School in Nalolo district of Western Province is in dire need of proper learning infrastructure as well as housing infrastructure for teachers. A KTV news crew that visited the school recently learned that only a 1x3 classroom block is constructed using concrete blocks, while other classrooms of mud bricks are in a deplorable state with the rainy season just around the corner. Teachers' houses, which are also made of mud bricks, are equally in a bad state with cracks on the wall. School Deputy Head Teacher Lamek Mukoboto has told QTV News that the school, which has classes running from early childhood education to grade 9, is faced with the challenge of inadequate classroom blocks to cater for the entire grades. We have more in this report.
According to the 2019 national budget presented by Finance Minister Margaret Mwanakatwe, funding to the primary education sector has reduced from 143 million kwacha to 102 million kwacha. This means that schools like Matongo Primary School of Nalolo District in Western Province will continue to operate under difficult circumstances. The infrastructure at Matongo, which is made of mud bricks, can best be described as a death trap, as deep cracks have developed in walls, while the floor of the classrooms equally has holes in them. The school's dilapidated infrastructure extends to teachers' houses. Lamek Mukoboto is the school's deputy head teacher.
I would say we have a few challenges as well. Maybe it may range from accommodation. The teachers' houses are not all that good. All our houses, they are temporary structures.
As if the infrastructure problem is not enough, distance to the school is another challenge the pupils at the school are faced with, as Mr. Mukoboto explains.
One of them, it is the long distances they cover from their homes coming to school. You would find that learners who have to trek from the plains coming to the upperland where the school is, you would find that some of the children would move, let's say, for 45 minutes, 1 hour or so.
However, not all is in a bad state at Matongo Primary School, as can be seen from this 1x3 classroom block that at least provides a conducive learning environment for the pupils. This is, however, inadequate to accommodate all the pupils. There is therefore need for the mega resources that have been allocated to the primary education sector in the 2019 national budget to be channeled towards challenges being experienced by schools, mostly in rural areas such as Matongo Primary School, as a way of providing a conducive learning environment for the pupils. Chilesha Mwango reporting for QTV News.
To end the news, we take a look at stories making headlines. Higher Education Minister Nkanduluo has angered members of parliament with her response on what led to the riot at the University of Zambia last Thursday. The Center for Trade Policy and Development, CTPD, has projected an increase in government debt accumulation as a result of increased borrowing. And the Jesuit Center for Theological Reflection, JCTR, says the decision by government to replace value-added tax with sales tax will enable the country to benefit more from the mining sector. On that note, we come to the end of the news. From me, Diana Sumbwe. Thank you for watching.